Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. How's he doing?
He's doing well, but
He's still in Minnesota?
he's in Minnesota. Yes.
With 2 feet of snow?
Yeah, he said it got really crazy. Okay, so Haman and Mordecai, right?
Right.
Sure.
Ah, fun people, right? You got, who would you prefer in your life?
Neither one.
Mordecai? Mhm. You know, he is such a good person compared to Haman, who was such a bad person. Haman, I guess the closest modern equivalent would be Hitler.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Total destruction. Can you imagine being so angry with someone you would want to kill everyone who is in any way associated? So that is a complete depravity, right? Have you ever experienced such a person in your life? Have you? I would ask you to elaborate, but I'm afraid to.
Yeah, I won't.
Okay, so you know, when hate goes to the point of being willing to actually cause harm, like hatred is so deep. There is only one response that we can know in regards to that, and that's application of the law, right? When someone is so depraved, they have to be stopped, and that's what the law does it not? It stops a person. How does someone get to that point where they are so depraved? And I'm going to throw this right out there for you. Luther called it the result of living under the righteousness of the law. So if you think that your goodness and everything else is all dependent on just doing the right thing, then eventually that can get twisted in your mind and heart in such a way that the right thing can be something that you define on your own. And that's exactly what Hitler did. He had this whole thought of the Aryan race and everything. He was convinced, along with a lot of other people, that they were doing something that was actually good, that would benefit the world and society. And all that comes from a way of thinking that there is this righteousness that can be achieved just by doing whatever is right. So that's not possible, is it? Our righteousness comes from Jesus Christ and the gospel, which is the forgiveness of sins, right? Our righteousness is based on his fulfilling all that is good. And so if you have that mindset of being made righteous by the one who has given himself for you, if you have that mind, and that so inspires you, so fills you with, can we call it gratitude? Is that a good way of describing it? Then that will in turn define all of your interactions with other people. You will be kind. The Lord has been kind to me. Be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one, just as
Christ.
Ephesians 4:32, right? Is that not the case? Okay, so that's Mordecai. All right, strange things about Mordecai. What was it about that he was standing out in front of the harem? Did you talk about that at all?
He was checking with us.
He was checking on Esther. What was he checking on? Well, what had happened to Esther? Esther had ended up,
Being one of the
Taken.
candidates for the new queen.
yeah, does that sound like a good thing?
Not really.
No, not knowing Xerxes.
I know, according to the way of the world, it would be a wonderful thing, right? But not for someone who is trying to live a righteous life. Righteous, because what was wrong with the whole situation in terms of marriage to the king?
Well, it was marriage there to him.
Yeah.
There was no marriage to him.
Right.
He couldn't, out of all the ones he's already had,
But as a Jewish woman,
he wasn't a Jew, so therefore it was not acceptable.
right? He wasn't Lutheran and not LCMS, right? Right? You know, so there is some of that that's kind of wrapped up into all of this, is there not? That a person from the outside might look at it and go, what the, you know, what's she thinking? Oh, it's for a religious reason? Well, that's hardly a reason. But is it a reason? Well, how so?
Well, one of the things we talked about was women in that day and age had no rights, and she was an orphan. So how is she going to provide for herself in the rest of her life? And he was looking out for her to be provided for.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe a good thing, and that she would have, been taken care of.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's say women did have rights in the sense that they had the right to be protected. And you went through all the stuff with the Goel, the Redeemer, and, you know, what that all meant, you know, that was part of what she could expect, right? What any woman could expect. That was the whole point of a dowry in those days. You know, with Mary and Joseph, right? Why he had in mind to divorce her quietly. What that meant was the dowry would be returned to her family. Her dowry was her Social Security check that Dad had given to her husband to be able to care for her the rest of her life. That was a big paycheck. That was her security. And that was supposed to be for her benefit. Now, he could have divorced her publicly, which meant that he kept the dowry. Right? So we start to see some of the women did have rights.
But as an orphan, did she have anything to give her dowry, other than maybe her cousin?
Right. So in every situation, the community that God had set up, women always had protection. There was always supposed to be someone who would step in and protect that person. And in the case of widows and orphans, there were actually communities that would come together, and they were held in high regard. So the Association of Widows, after the resurrection, you know, they're spoken of, and you know, the community is going, who's going to make sure that the widows receive a fair allocation, especially because the widows were composed of both Gentiles and Jews in the church, and there was dispute that one or the other was getting more of the support, right? And the apostles were getting caught up into this argument, and they said, this is not good. Let's appoint deacons to be able to make sure that that was administered well, right? So there were rights associated with these things. All women had a protected status. I remember my mother telling me, what was it, the ERA, equal rights. She's like, I don't agree with that at all. My mother had her doctorate. She came from a world in which women didn't have rights, as many of you remember this stuff. And she was real pro women and so on. I'm like, well, why not? She goes, well, the ERA says that all the privileges that we've enjoyed as women are going to be taken away from us without something in place already for it to be truly equal. She was right. I think things have become a little more equal now, but even now, are women equal? Why not? You have babies. That takes you out of the career force, right? And there's a lot of work that has happened in that, but how can you be expected? You have other things that men don't deal with. Competing. I'm not going to go too much further here, but I love running, that whole things. I'm watching this happen where men are transitioning into women. Another whole discussion. Everything else is setting that aside. How can that be fair to women? It's not. It's just not. And there's a rule that is in the House right now. HR 734. How do I remember that? I don't know. But it's saying that should not happen. That if there's going to be transgender, they can compete against other transgenders, not against women, right? So not saying that they shouldn't compete, but it should be a separate category, which is what they did at the Boston Marathon. They had another class that the transgender could also compete. Okay, fine, good enough. That's the way to handle that. But instead, Biden has said he's going to veto right out of the bat. And I've got nothing against Biden. He's the president of the United States, and I support him. But good grief, come on. At what point can it be said that we are treating women fairly? And at what point can women truly be equal? You can't in some senses. You can't compete against a guy in certain situations. There's no matter what we do. They're physically different, right? The same thing with guys. You cannot compete against a woman in a lot of ways, including emotional capacities, things like this, that make you better at doing many things. Okay, so setting aside what that all means and everything else, getting back to Esther, did she have protections? Who did she have protecting her? Mordecai. It was his responsibility to make sure that she was safe. And so he would go out there every day and check it. How are things going? Having someone like that who's calling you, checking on you, isn't that nice? You got that in your life?
Yeah.
We actually even set up ministries in our church, the church is where I serve, to make sure that everybody had that. Even calls, daily calls. You still there? You up and going? You need any help? You need anything? It's nice to get that, right? It comes a point, especially when you're alone. Okay. So Mordecai was that person as opposed to Haman. What else can we say about this? What other burning issue came from this?
I think we talked a lot about what the question was. Well, the difference on like number 9, difference between stubborn resistance and misusing the law or whatever.
Oh,
I mean, like,
yeah.
well, like we were, I guess I was talking about, like parents in schools now trying to be obedient, but yet they're saying, I don't want this for my child. That they have to be identified in a different way, that kind of thing. I mean, it's hard, I think, today, in today's world, to know when to take a stand and when to be obedient to authority. Like you said, being respectful for who's ever in charge, but at the same time, watching out for your children and what's being put in their brains, for instance. I don't know. I just think that discernment today is really hard on a lot of issues.
So famously, there is a Supreme Court case, only famous in our eyes because it involved the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, right? Back in the 1800s. The state of Nebraska was insisting that everyone be taught in English. And had these German schools. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was decided in favor of the Lutherans. They're Lutheraners. They could do this because a principle was established that families, parents, have the ultimate say over their kids. And so for that reason, based on that, we have homeschooling. So we know where this is all going to end up. It's going to eventually wind through the courts and everything like that. And then, assuming that the court doesn't do something crazy like the Roe v. versus Wade thing that they did some years back, where they create law when there's actually precedent against it, that they'll go with that. And it's going to end up fine. But yeah, it takes someone standing up to it. It takes the state actually trying to impose it, and some parent crying foul, and for that winding its way all the way through. It's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time and effort for someone to stand up to do that. Okay. Most recently, well, this happened a number of times with KFVOL. You know about that? The religious broadcast station located on the campus of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. And they weren't hiring enough ethnic. No, they weren't. It's located right there on the campus. It's a publicly broadcast station. And so whenever they would post job openings, who would apply?
STEM students.
STEM students. How many black STEM students do you know? We have not done a good job of recruiting as we ought to, sufficiently among minorities within our church body. So those were the ones who were getting the job, but based on that, the NAACP sued, and the whoever the broadcast, FTC or whatever, whoever that governs the airwaves, took up the case with them, went all the way to the Supreme Court. Cost over $1 million in court fees. Yeah, for the LCMS to win. We won.
What difference did it make to the NAACP?
Well, right. So, but because the same difference that it makes for parents to say that, or for school administrators perhaps to say that they should be able to teach my child that he is a woman at a very vulnerable stage in his life, a very confusing thing. Don't kids do imagination? Don't they wonder sometimes what it would be like to be a dog? I did. We have these thoughts at various points in our life, and then if you're fed with the thought that, well, maybe you are, contrary to all evidence, the obvious evidence, I don't have hair, I don't have claws, I'm not and so it's helpful to know that there is resolution to these really bizarre things that are taking place. But it will take people standing up. Right? And this is not something that's new and recent. This is something that constantly happens in our society. Constantly, so far, wisdom has prevailed. Okay? So be confident. And vote. Yeah. All right. Enough on that. Any other really terrible things? I can say this, over in Germany, did people stand up against Hitler?
No,
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 They did. They died. They died. There were plenty of people. And we don't know these stories because various reasons. But like the mayor of Berlin was executed.
the what?
Mayor of Berlin was executed for standing up against Hitler. I have family members. One, the Nazis came down, the SS came down to recruit him to serve in the military. And it's my uncle's father. And he was a farmer. He just refused. They took him down the river, shot him, killed him. People did stand up. They died. So it's hard for us to understand what it's like to live under a totalitarian government. We have not experienced that, thankfully. There's shades of that happening right now, which makes us all very nervous. There's been shades of that all throughout our history. This is nothing new. There's always people who tried, there's always hands lurking. And who are very zealous, thinking that they're doing what is best for others, for everyone. Okay? That's what you come up against. It's okay. It's okay. We have our Lord. And be thankful. Right? So definitely stand up to. When did that end? When did Hitler's tyranny end? And that totalitarianism associated with that, which is really behind all of it, because it continued after the war, right? When did it all end? When the Berlin Wall came down. You know what was behind the Berlin Wall coming down? The church. It was.
what year was that?
1989. And the people were just silently, quietly protesting and becoming more and more secure. During the war, what happens? People just stopped going to church. They worshipped at home, right? And then after then people started coming again to the church very, very quietly, and it slowly built up to the point where, especially among the youth groups and such, they became more and more emboldened. And finally, the candles, lights, and everything, that all started church services. The silent, quiet protests that were going on. Right? Abortion. At one point, most Americans thought it was something that was good and positive, right? Roe versus Wade, law of the land. What's happened?
It's not good, Jim.
The conversation slowly changed, and most people think that it's not good, and the law's been changed. So don't be dismayed, folks. Mordecai, that's what wins the day. At the end of the day, God sometimes takes a long time to do this stuff. But Haman ends up hanging. Right? That's all right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do pray for your protection on our nation, that you would watch over us, keep us safe, that you would be with our leaders, give them wisdom to see clearly what is the truth and what is truly best. And behind that, the freedom that is true freedom and true peace, which we know can only be found in your Son, Jesus Christ. And so we pray for renewal of your word among us, among your people, among our nation, a renewal of zeal for you and the truth that comes from you, a renewal in our own families for a desire to worship you and to know you. We ask that you would make us individuals who are unafraid to speak up, and yet to do so in such a way that leads others to know that you are above all a kind God, a loving God, a patient God. We ask all of this through your Son, Jesus Christ. In his name we pray. All right. I gotta say one more thing, all right? Because it came as I was speaking. You know how the early church grew?
The early church as in Lutheran or as in Christianity?
As in Christianity, how it prospered and really, it was through
Persecution.
It was through women.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Women.
Too right.
Don't ever forget that. And that's what happened with the church in Germany too. Okay.